Chapter 14, Pairs Repaired. The snowplows plowed, and a warm sun finished the job of freeing the tenants of Sunset Towers and the figure in the Westing house from their wintry prisons. Angela, disguised in her mother's old beaver coat and hat, and Turtle in red boots, was the first one out. Following Seidel's instructions, she hastily searched under the hood of every car in the parking lot. Nothing was there. Nothing, that is, that didn't seem to belong to an automobile engine. So much for good gracious from hood space. Next came Flora Baumbach. Behind her, a bootless Turtle tiptoed through puddles. Miracle of miracles, the rusty and battered Chevy started, but the dressmaker's luck went downhill from there. First, the hood of her car flew up in the middle of traffic. Why was that? Because Angela popped it, looking for clues. Then, after 2 hours of watching mysterious symbols move across the lighted panel, high on the wall of the broker's office, her eyes began to cross. After 3 hours, the grin faded from her face. "I'm getting dizzy," she said, shifting her position on the hard wooden folding chair. "And worse yet, I think I've got a splinter in my fanny." "Look, there goes one of our stocks," Turtle replied. Flora Baumbach caught a glimpse of SEA at 5 at 8.5. As it was about to magically disappear off the left edge of the moving screen. "Oh my, I've forgotten what that means," Turtle sighed. "It means 500 shares of SEA was traded at $8.50 a share. Well, what did we pay?" "Never mind, just write it down. Write down the prices of our stocks as they cross the tape like I'm doing. Once school opens, it's all up to you." Turtle did not tell her partner that they had bought 200 shares of SEA at $15.25 a share. On that stock alone, they had a loss of $1,350, not counting commissions. It took nerves of steel to play the stock market. "The Mercedes is wiped clean and shiny like new," the doorman boasted. His face reddened around the old scars as he rejected a folded $5 bill. Underline old scars. We want to remember that for the physical description. "No tips, Judge, please. Not after all you've done for the wife and me." The judge had given them the entire $10,000. J.J. Ford pocketed the bill and, to make amends for her thoughtless gesture, asked the doorman about his family. "This is important. We're learning about him." Sandy perched on the edge of a straight-backed chair, adjusted his round wire-framed glasses, repaired at the bridge with adhesive tape across his broken nose, and told about his children. 2 boys still in high school, 1 daughter married and expecting my 3rd grandchild. Her husband lost his job, so they all moved in with us. Another daughter who works part-time as a typist, she plays piano real good, and 2 sons who work in a brewery. "It must have been difficult supporting such a large family," the judge said. "Not so bad. I picked up odd jobs here and there after I got fired from the Westing plant for trying to organize the union, but mostly I boxed. I wasn't no middleweight contender, but I wasn't bad either. Got my face smashed up a few times too many, though. Still get some pretty bad headaches, and my brain gets sort of fuzzy. Some dummy of a partner you got stuck with, huh, Judge?" "We'll do just fine, partner." Judge Ford's attempt at familiarity fell flat. I did try to phone you, but your name was not listed." "We don't have a phone no more. Couldn't afford it with the kids making so many calls. But I did make some headway on our clues. Want to see?" Sandy removed a paper from the inside of his cap and placed it on the desk. Judge Ford noticed a flask protruding from the back pocket of his uniform, but his breath smelled of peppermint. The clues as figured out by Alexander McSuthers. Sky's Am shining brother. Sky's. Sykes. Dr. Sykes witnessed the will. Am, brother. Amber, Otis Amber. Shining, Shin, the middle name of James Shin Who, or What Turtle Kicks. Brother, Theo or Chris Theodorakis. "Remarkable," the judge commented to Sandy's delight. "However, we are looking for 1 name, not 6. "Gee, Judge, I forgot," Sandy said dejectedly. Judge Ford told him about Theo's proposal, but Sandy refused to go along. "It seems too easy, the clues adding up to one message, especially for a shrewd guy like Westing. Let's stick it out together, just the 2 of us. After all, I got me the smartest partner of 'em all." Shallow flattery for the big tipper, the judge thought. McSuthers was not a stupid man, if he only was less obsequious and less of a gossip. The doorman scratched his head. "What I can't figure out, Judge, is why I'm one of the heirs, unless Sam Westing just up and died and there is no murderer. Unless Sam Westing is out to get somebody from his grave." I agree with you entirely, Mr. McSuthers. What we have to find out is who these 16 heirs are and which one, as you say, was Westing out to get. Sandy beamed. They were going to play it his way. What you need is an advertising campaign. What I need is my half of the $10,000. $5,000 is what I estimate the redecorating and the newspaper ads will cost. Get out of here, get out. Grace stared at Who's smooth, broad face, at the devilish tufts of eyebrows, so high that above those flashing eyes, and then she turned her back and walked out. Sometimes she wondered about that man. No, he couldn't be the murderer. He couldn't even kill the water bug in the sink this morning. Grace spun around to see if she was being followed on the footstep hushing carpet in the third-floor hall. No one was there, but she heard voices. They were coming from her kitchen. It was nothing, just Otis Amber shouting at Crow. Something about losing their clues. I remember them, Otis, Crow replied in a soft voice. She felt strangely at peace. Just this morning she had been given the chance to hide her love in Angela's bag, the big tapestry shoulder bag she carries next to her heart. Now she must pray that the boy comes back. I remember them too, that's not the point, Otis Amber argued. What if somebody else finds them, Crow? Are you listening to me, Crow? Okay, I want to back up for a second. This little piece right here, she put something in Angela's bag. And so underline that. It's okay if it doesn't make sense to you right now, but we are going to discover what she put into Angela's bag. No, but Grace Wexler was listening. Really, Mr. Amber, can't you find another time to discuss your affairs with my cleaning woman? And where are you going, Crow? Crow was buttoned up in a black moth-eaten winter coat. A black shawl covered her head. It's freezing in here. Otis Amber shut the window. Grace opened the window. The last thing I need is a gas explosion, she said peevishly. Boom, he replied. The two women were so startled that the delivery boy sneaked up on the unsuspecting for the rest of the week, shouting, Boom! Besides shouting boom, Otis Amber delivered groceries from the shopping center to Sunset Towers back and forth, to and fro. Not only did the tenants have to restock their bare shelves, they had to add Westing paper products by the gross to their orders. Idiots. Just because the will said buy Westing paper products, he muttered, hefting a bulky bag from the compartment attached to his bike. Even Crow was using Westing disposable diapers to polish the silver and Westing paper towels to scrub the floors. Is that what happened to their clues? Poor Crow. She's been taking this game harder than he'd expected. She's been acting strange again. Underline that. She's been acting strange again. Boom! Otis Amber shouted as the intern hurried by. Idiot, muttered Denton Deer. Denton Deer paced the floor. Listen, kid, I'd like to help you, but I'm only an intern specializing in plastic surgery. It would be different if you wanted a nose job or a facelift. He had meant to be amusing. It sounded cruel. Chris had not asked for charity. All he wanted was to play the game with the intern. All the intern wanted was half the $10,000. I hear your brother suggested sharing the clues. Sounds like a fine idea. No response. Maybe the kid thinks I'm the murderer? The tenants must think so, the way they peered over their shoulders, and that delivery boy shouting like that. Why me? I'm a doctor. I took an oath to save lives, not take them. I'm a very busy man, Chris. I've got lots of sick people depending on me. Oh well. Plowing his fingers through his stringy mouse-brown hair, underline that, that's the physical description, to keep it out of his eyes. When would he find time for a haircut? He seated himself next to the wheelchair. The clues are in my locker. What were they? The rain in Spain falls mainly on the plain. 4. Plain grain shed, Chris spoke slowly. He had practiced his recitation over and over, hour after lonely hour. Grain, oats, Otis Amber. 4. Shed, sheep, Ford. Ford lives in 4D. Ford, apartment 4D. Good thinking, Chris. The intern rose. Is that all? Chris decided not to tell him about the limper on the lawn, not until next time. His partner would have to visit him a next time, and a next time, as long as he didn't sign the check. Now, about signing the check, Denton Deer said. Chris shook his head. No. On the bench in the lobby, Angela embroidered her trousseau, waiting for Denton. Dad had tried to teach her to drive, but she was too timid, he too impatient. Why bother with driving lessons, her mother said. Anyone as pretty as you can always find a handsome young man to chauffeur you. She should have insisted. She should have just said no, just once to her mother, just once. It was too late now. Underline that. She should have said no just once to her mother, just once. Here we're getting the dynamic of how she feels around her mother. Theo came in with an armload of books. Hey, Angela. Hey, I found that quotation, or rather the librarian found it. May God thy gold refine. Really? Angela thought it unnecessary to remind him that it was Flora Baumbach and Turtle who had asked him about the quotation, not she. What lush lips. What white teeth. What fine and shiny hair. So Theo's got a bit of a crush on her. That's him thinking that. Theo fumbled between the pages of a chemistry book for the index card. On it was written the third verse of America the Beautiful. America, America, may God thy gold refine, till all success be nobleness, and every gain divine. Theo had begun reading the refrain and ended up singing. He shyly laughed off his foolishness. I guess it doesn't have anything to do with money or the will, just Uncle Sam's patriotism popping up again. Well, thank you, Theo. Angela stuffed her embroidery in the tapestry bag on seeing Denton Deer rush off the elevator. Hello, Dr. Deer. How about a game of chess? Let's go, the intern said, ignoring Theo. Sandy opened the front door for the couple, whistling America the Beautiful. And the doorman was a good whistler, thanks to his chipped front tooth. I can't drive you home. I'm on duty tonight. I'll take a cab. Why must you go back to the hospital? Your crazy partner isn't dying, She's not crazy. She made up her so-called wasting disease. I call that crazy. Nothing was wrong with her legs until the explosion in the Chinese restaurant. You're wrong. First, you asked me to look in on her. Now you don't want my opinion. Anyhow, I called a psychiatrist. Maybe you should talk to him, too. I've never seen you so troubled. What's wrong? Is the wedding dress isn't ready? The guest list is too long? You'll have to cope with more important matters than that once we're married. Unless you don't want to get married. Is that it? Angela twisted the engagement ring her mother made her wear in spite of the rash. No, she did not want to get married. Not right away, but she couldn't say it. She couldn't tell him. Them, not like that. Underline that. That's very important for motive. Denton would be so hurt. Her mother, the engagement was announced in the newspaper, the wedding gown, the shower. But once they found out she wasn't their perfect Angela, underline that. How long has she been sitting here in the hospital corridor? A man in a business suit, the psychiatrist, came out of Seidel's room. You must be Angela, he said. How had Seidel described her? A pretty young thing? I hear you're going to marry one of our interns. She was going to get married. Her one claim to fame. How is Miss Pulaski, Doctor? You mean, is she crazy? No, more or less crazy than anybody else in town. But the crippling disease, she made that up. So what? The woman was lonely and wanted some attention, so she did something about it. And quite creatively, too. Those painted crutches are a touch of genius. Is that normal? I mean, it's not insane to shock people into noticing who you are? The doctor patted Angela's cheek as though she were a child. No one was hurt by her little deception. Now, go in and say hello to your friend. Hello, Seidel. Without makeup, without jewelry, clothed in only a white hospital gown, she looked older, softer. She looked like a sad and homely human being. Do you talk to the doctors? It's a simple fracture, Angela replied. What else? Seidel turned her face to the wall. The doctor says your disease is incurable, but you could have a remission lasting 5 years, even more, if you take good care of yourself and don't overdo it. The doctor said that? Maybe a few people could be trusted. Did you bring my makeup? I must look a mess. In the overstuffed tapestry bag, under Seidel's cosmetic case, Angela found a letter. It was a strange letter, written in a tense and rigid hand. Forgive me, my daughter. God bless you, my child. Delight in your love, and let the devil take Dr. Deer. Hast thou found me, O mine enemy? The time draws near. Taped at the bottom were 2 clues, thy and beautiful. Okay. Who was that letter from? Written in a tense and rigid hand. We'll discuss it if you're not sure. Chapter 15, Fact and Gossip. Friday was back to normal, if the actions of suspicious would-be heirs competing for a $200 million prize could be considered normal. At school, Theo studied, Doug Who ran, and Turtle was twice sent to the principal's office for having been caught with a transistor radio plugged in her ear. The coffee shop was full of diners. Shin Who's restaurant had reopened too, but no one came. J.J. Ford presided at the bench, and Sandy McSuthers presided at the front door, whistling, chatting, collecting tidbits of gossip, and adding some of his own. Flora Baumbach, her strained eyes shielded by dark glasses, drove Turtle to school on her way to the broker's office and picked her up in the late afternoon with a sheet of prices copied from the moving tape. They had lost $3,000 in 5 days. It's interesting that Grace doesn't even take her own daughter to school. Paper losses, Turtle said, doesn't mean a thing. Besides, I didn't pick these stocks. Mr. Westing did. Did he? The dressmaker thought of the clue Chris had dropped. No stock symbol had 5 letters or even resembled the word plain, but Flora Baumbach played fair and kept the secret to herself. 4 people stood in the driveway's melting snow, shivering as the sun dropped behind Sunset Towers. The 5th jogged in place. No smoke had risen from the chimney since that fateful Halloween. They still stared up at the Westing house, murder on their minds. He looked too peaceful to have been murdered, Turtle said. She sneezed, and Sandy handed her a Westing tissue. How would you know? Doug replied. How many people have you seen murdered? Well, that's right, her friend Sandy said. If Westing expected it, he'd have seen it coming. His face would have looked scared. Maybe he didn't see it coming, Theo argued. The killer was very cunning, Westing said. I read a mystery once where the victim was allergic to bee stings and the murderer let a bee in through an open window. The window wasn't open, Turtle said, wiping her nose. Besides, Westing would have heard the buzzing and jumped out of bed. Doug had an idea. Maybe the murderer injected bee venom in his veins. Otis Amber flung his arms in the air. Whoever said Sam Westing was allergic to bees? Doug tried again. How about snake venom or poison? Doctors know lots of poisons that make it look like heart attacks. Turtle almost kicked Doug, track meet or not. Her father was a doctor. She would not have minded if he had said interns. I once heard about a murderer who stabbed his victim with an icicle, the doorman said. It melted, leaving no trace of a murder weapon. That's a good one, Turtle exclaimed appreciatively. Sandy had more. Then there was a Roman who choked on a single goat hair someone put in his milk. And there was the Greek poet who was killed when an eagle dropped a tortoise on his bald head. Maybe Westing was just sleeping until Turtle stumbled and fell on his head, Doug suggested. That's not funny, Doug Who. How could she ever have a crush on that disgusting jerk? Doug would not let up. And who was that suspicious person in red boots I saw opening the hoods of cars in the parking lot the other morning? He looked at Turtle's booted feet. The thief stole my boots and put them back. Again, they leak. A likely story, Tabitha Ruth. Doug pulled her braid and ran into the lobby at full speed. Sandy placed a large hand on Turtle's shoulder, a comforting hand, and a restraining one. Otis Amber hopped on his bike. Can't stand around chit-chatting about a murder that never happened. Sam Westing was a madman, insane, crazy as a bedbug. He pedaled off, shouting back, We ain't murderers, none of us. Theo could agree. Could not agree. If there was no murderer, then there was no answer, and without an answer, no one could win. Sandy, did anybody leave Sunset Towers on Halloween night before Turtle and Doug? The doorman scratched his head under his hat, thinking, One day seems like the next, people coming and going. I can't remember. Try. Sandy scratched harder. Only ones I recall are Otis Amber and Crow. They left together about 5 o'clock. Thanks. Theo hurried into the building to check his clues. Turtle had no reason to suspect Otis Amber or Crow or any of the heirs. Money was the answer. Her only problem was that dumb stock market. It didn't want to play the game. Sandy, tell me another story. Okay, let's see. Once, long ago in the olden days, there was this soothsayer who predicted the day of his own death. That day came, and the soothsayer waited to die and waited some more, but nothing happened. He was so surprised and so happy to be alive that he laughed and laughed, and then at 1 minute to midnight he suddenly died. He died laughing. He died laughing? Turtle repeated thoughtfully. That's profound, Sandy. That's very profound. Where's everybody? The apartment was empty as usual. Jake Wexler decided that Shinhu's was going to have a paying customer. I'd like a table if you're not too crowded. I think I can squeeze you in, Hu said, leading the podiatrist through the empty restaurant. You must have liked those spare ribs. Yeah, sure. Jake watched his wife slowly stack her papers at the reservations desk. At last, seeming to recognize him, she walked over. Jake returned his unlit cigar to his pocket. Grace hated the smell. I've already eaten, Grace said, sitting down. Hello to you too, Jake replied. He probably thinks that's funny. Since when do people go around saying hello to their husbands? What's new with you, Grace? Where are the kids? And what are all those presents doing on the coffee table? It's not your birthday, and it's not our anniversary. What was she so upset about? Or is it? No, it isn't. Those are gifts for Angela. The wedding shower is tomorrow. Don't worry, you're not supposed to be there, just girls. The doorbell was ringing all morning. I couldn't leave the apartment for an instant. One at a time he delivered them, the smirking fool, and each time he shouted boom. She looked especially attractive today, Jake thought. Between the ringing doorbell and the booms, she had managed time for the beauty parlor and the sun lamp. Mr. Hu set the spare ribs on the table and lowered himself to a chair. Grace lost her scowl. Since you're here, Jake, I'd like your opinion on the advertising campaign I'm planning. Jimmy and I are having a slight disagreement. I say that Shin Hu's sounds like every other Chinese restaurant to English-speaking ears. English-speaking ears? Jake bit his lip in an effort to keep silent. I say the restaurant needs a name people won't forget, Grace continued. A name like Who's on First? Jake could not help himself. He tried to cover a loud guffaw with louder coughing. Hu pounded him on the back and apologized for the ginger. Remember that old baseball routine, Jake? Grace prompted. Yes, he did. Who's on second? No, what's on second? Who's on first? It's an idiotic name, Hu argued. Who's on First sounds like my restaurant is on First Street, or worse yet, on the first floor. Customers will end up in the coffee shop drinking dishwater tea. Not the way I'd promote it, they won't, Grace insisted. Well, what's your opinion, Jake? The podiatrist put down the spare rib he was about to bite into. Who's on First is a dandy name. Before he could pick up the rib again, Hu whisked the plate off the table. Who elected you judge, anyhow? The judge returned to Sunset Towers with clippings from the newspaper files. Faithful Sandy was waiting. Hoping to interrogate both George Theodorakis and James Shinhu, they alternated their dinner orders. One night they would order up, and the next night they would order down. To their disappointment, Theo delivered up. They had no questions to ask him, but he had one for the doorman. Chess? Sandy replied. Sorry, I don't know the game. I'm a whiz at hearts, though. Shooter, they call me. Theo left them to their sandwiches at their work. The private detective the judge had hired was still investigating the heirs, so tonight's project would be the Westing family. Judge Ford opened the thin folder on Mrs. Westing. Mrs. Westing, no first name, no maiden name. In the few newspaper photographs in which she appeared, always with her husband, the captions read, Mr. and Mrs. Samuel W. Westing. A shadowy figure, a shy woman, she seemed to slip behind her husband before the camera clicked, or had her face masked by a floppy hat brim. A slim woman dressed in the fashion of the time, long, loose chemise, narrow shoes with sharply pointed toes and high spiked heels. A nervous woman. Her hands, especially in the later pictures, were blurred. That's curious. In the final photograph, a black veil covered her face. She seemed to lean unsteadily against the stocky frame of her husband as they left the cemetery. Sandy reported his findings. Jimmy Hu never met Mrs. Westing, neither did Flora Baumbach. She says Violet's fiancé brought her to the shop for fittings. She says it's bad luck for a groom to see the bride in her wedding gown before the wedding. I guess she's right. Well, that's it. Nobody else admits to having known Mrs. Westing except me. You knew her, Mr. McSuthers? The judge asked. Well, not exactly, but I saw her once or twice, the doorman described. Mrs. Westing is a blonde, full-lipped, a good figure, though on the skinny side. Mostly I recall those full lips because she had a mole right here, and pointed to the right corner of his mouth. Judge Ford did not remember a mole. She remembered copper-colored hair and thin lips. But it was so long ago, and while Mrs. Westing was white, very white. Next, Westing's daughter. The judge studied the photograph under the headline. Okay, so you just realized, and Judge Ford is thinking to herself that doesn't match the physical description. So Judge Ford knows Mrs. Westing, or knew her, from a previous time. Mark that with a star or circle it. That's important. So here's the photograph headline. Violet Westing to marry senator. The senator turned out to be a state senator, a hack politician, now serving a 5-year jail term for bribery. But Flora Baumbach was right about the resemblance. Violet Westing did look like Angela Wexler. And that was George Theodorakis, all right, dancing with her in the society page clippings. What does it all mean, Judge? Sandy asked, squinting at the pictures through his smeared glasses. Angela looks like Westing's daughter, and Theo looks like his father, the man Violet Westing really wanted to marry? Underline that. The man Violet Westing really wanted to marry. How did you know that? Sandy shrugged. It was common gossip at the time that Westing's daughter killed herself rather than have to marry that crooked politician. Now the judge remembered. Her mother had written her about the tragedy. Tell me, Mr. McSuthers, you seem to know what's going on in this building. Is Angela Wexler involved with Theo in any way? Oh, no. Sandy was certain of that. Angela and her intern seem happy enough with each other. At least, I hope so. I mean, if Sam Westing wanted to replay that terrible drama, Angela Wexler would have to die. Chapter 16. The Third Bomb. Boom! Grace Wexler slammed the door on the delivery boy's silly face and returned to her party with a pink-ribboned gift. The gossiping guests were sipping jasmine tea from Westing paper party cups, nibbling on tidbits from Westing paper party plates, and wiping their fingers on Westing paper party napkins. Madame Hu served in a tight-fitting silk gown slit high up her thigh, a costume as old-fashioned and impractical as bound feet. Women in China wore blouses and pants and jackets. That's what she would wear when she got home. Grace clapped her hands for attention. Girls, it's time for the bride-to-be to open her presents. Angela, you sit here, and everybody gather around. Angela did as her mother said. She lowered herself to a cushion on the floor, ringed by gifts and surrounded by vaguely familiar faces. She had not invited her few friends from college. They were bent on careers, and this wasn't their thing. These were her mother's friends, and the newly married daughters of her mother's friends. And Turtle, who was leaning against the wall, arms folded, smirking. Lucky Turtle, the neglected child. Read it out loud, dear, Grace ordered as Angela opened the card tied to the yellow ribbon box. To the bride-to-be in the kitchen stuck, an asparagus cooker and lots of luck. From Cookie Barf Springer. Thank you, Angela said, wondering which one was the barf springer. The next gift was an egg poacher. The box in pink ribbons contained another asparagus cooker. I sure hope Dr. Dear likes asparagus, somebody remarked. The giver said she could return it for something else, although 2 might come in handy. A doctor's wife has so much entertaining to do. Angela glanced at her watch, reached for the tall, thin carton wrapped in gold foil. Look how Angela's hands are shaking. She's as nervous as a groom. Giggles. Bride-to-be jitters. More giggles. Slowly, Angela unknotted the gold ribbon. Carefully unfolded the gold foil. How neatly she did everything. The perfect child. Not like Turtle, who ripped off wrappings, impatient to see what was inside. Hurry up, Angela. You're such a poke, Turtle complained. Suddenly, there she was, kneeling down to peek under the lid. Get away, Angela cried, jerking the gift up and away from her sister as the lid blasted off with a shattering bang. Bang, bang, a rapid rat-a-tat. Rockets shooting, fireballs bursting, comets shrieking, sparks sizzling, 24 framed flower prints falling off the wall. Then it was over. Screams, hushed to whimpers, and the trembling guests crawled out from under tables and peered out of closets. Is anyone hurt? Grace Wexler asked nervously. Other than being scared out of 10 years of their lives, thank you, they were fine. Where's Angela? Angela was still seated on the cushion in the middle of the floor. Fragments of the scorch box lay in her burned hands. Blood oozed from an angry gash on her cheek and trickled down her beautiful face. Heirs beware, Sam Westing had warned. They should have listened. Now it was too late. The suspicious heirs gathered in the lobby around the police captain, called in by Judge Ford. One of them was a murderer, they thought, and one of them was a bomber, and one of them was a thief. But which was which, and who was who, or could it be one and the same? Some game, Mr. Who grumbled, unwrapping a chocolate bar. One ulcer wasn't enough. Sam Westing had to give him 3 more. Some game. The last one alive wins. Now there's a likely suspect, Otis Amber thought. Who, the inventor? Who, the angry man, the madman? The last one alive wins, Flora Baumbach repeated. Oh my, what a terrible thing to say. Can't trust that dressmaker, Mr. Who thought. How come she's grinning at a time like this? The captain offered no help at all. Neither the bomb squad nor the burglary detail has enough evidence to search the apartments, he explained. You call that justice? Sandy asked. Good-natured Sandy couldn't be the one. He wasn't in the building when the first 2 bombs went off or when Judge's watch was stolen, Jake Wexler thought. On the other hand, he sure did hate Sam Westing. Yes, Mr. McSuthers, justice is exactly what I call it. Not her, not the judge, in spite of the clues, Chris thought. Unless she's one of those Black Panthers in disguise. Those weren't gas explosions, those were bombs, right? Theo pressed the captain. Nice kid, that Theo. Doug too, Flora Baumbach thought. But how often had she seen television interviews of next-door neighbors saying, I can't believe he killed 13 people, he was such a nice kid. Oh my, what's gotten into me thinking such a thing? The captain would not call them bombs. More like childish pranks, he said. Childish pranks? That brat's capable of anything. Turtle stuck out her tongue at the sneering Doug Who. Evil pranks of the devil, Crow muttered. Her blessed Angela was almost killed. Crow could be the one. Bringing hellfire down on all of us, Theo whispered to Chris. But she wasn't in the building when the first 2 bombs went off. Yes, she was. No, she wasn't. The captain described the so-called bombs, just a few fireworks triggered by a squat striped candle set in a tall open jar. The ribbon probably hid air holes in the box. No one would have been hurt if the young lady had not tilted the box toward herself. Underline that. And what I was just reading before, we were bouncing around in everybody's minds. Now all the heirs are starting to suspect each other, so that's sort of bouncing around, them kind of eyeing each other, thinking like what could be the motive or what made them seem suspicious. A time bomb, Grace Wexler said, glaring at the person who delivered the gifts. An unhappy woman, that self-appointed heiress, the judge thought, unfulfilled, possibly disturbed, capable of the burglaries, perhaps, but not the bombings. She wouldn't have hurt her own daughter, at least not Angela. Don't look at me like that, Otis Amber shouted at Mrs. Wexler. I don't know no striped candles or no fireworks neither. That idiot is the likeliest of all, Grace thought. But he wasn't around when the coffee shop blew up. Ooga. Excitement was too much for Chris Theodorakis. That was the heir no one suspected. And Angela, of course. No one could suspect her. Otis Amber was not even sure of that. Still waters run deep, he said. Turtle could not let him get away with that, even if it was true. Otis Amber limps, Chris noted the next day. Her family kept reassuring her, You're going to be fine, Angela, just fine. The loud snore that erupted from the next hospital bed was Seidel Pulaski pretending to be asleep. I still don't remember, Angela mumbled. Her bandaged cheek made speaking difficult. Her face hurt. Her hands hurt. Hurt very much. Traumatic amnesia, Jake Wexler said. It happens after sudden accidents. Don't worry, Angie Pie, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine, Angela. Just fine, Grace said despondently. I'll be back tomorrow. Come, Turtle. In a minute. Turtle waited for the door to close. She touched her sister's bandaged hand. Thanks. For what? Another snore from Seidel. Just thanks. The fireworks would have gone off in my face if you hadn't pulled the box toward you. Here, I brought your tapestry bag. I didn't look at your notes or clues, honest. But she had removed the incriminating evidence. Underline that. Turtle, tell me the truth. How bad is it? The doctor had to take some glass out of your hands, but no stitches, and the burns will heal okay. And my face? Some scarring. Not bad, really, Angela. Besides, you always said that being pretty wasn't important. It's who you really are that counts. Angela wondered about that. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe pretty was important. Maybe she was crazy. She must have been crazy. Don't worry, you'll still be pretty, Turtle said. But, wow, that sure was a dumb thing to do. Seidel Pulaski's eyes popped open in surprise. Quickly she squeezed them shut and uttered another loud snore. Well, what do you know? Her sweet, saintly partner was the bomber. Good for her. So now we know who the bomber is. And that's the end of that chapter.